Ethan Parker had always believed that time could bury the past, that distance and busyness could make old pain dissolve quietly. But as he stood inside his late mother's house for the first time in years, he felt the weight of everything he had tried to forget pressing against his chest. The air smelled faintly of cedar and lavender, the scent she always loved, and every creak of the wooden floor seemed to whisper his name like a forgotten lullaby. The house was still, yet it carried echoes of a life once lived fully. Framed photographs of birthdays, a chipped teacup beside the sink, a half-written grocery list stuck to the fridge. It wasn't just a home. It was a museum of memories that never got the chance to grow old. Ethan, a journalist used to writing about other people's truths, suddenly realized he had been running from his own. His mother had died 3 months ago, and though he attended the funeral, he had left before the eulogies, unable to stand the weight of what he didn't say to her. Now standing in her living room, surrounded by the quiet hum of her absence, guilt clawed at him with invisible hands. He had promised to visit, to call, to write, promises swallowed by deadlines and city lights. He started cleaning, perhaps to distract himself, perhaps to earn some kind of redemption through motion. Dust settled on his shoulders like a confession, and in the stillness, he noticed a narrow crack behind a row of old hardbound novels. Curiosity tugged him at him. He pulled the books aside, revealing a small wooden box with a brass latch, worn smooth by time. His heart began to beat faster, not with excitement, but with something that felt like fear. He hesitated before opening it, his fingers trembling as if the wood itself might burn. Inside lay a neat stack of letters, each sealed in faded white envelopes, the handwriting delicate yet firm, his mother's. The first one bore his name, written the way she used to write it on his school lunches. To my son, Ethan. He sat on the couch, the late afternoon light spilling across the floor, painting everything in gold and grief. When he tore the envelope open, he felt as though he were trespassing into a private world, one where his mother still lived and breathed through ink and memory. Her words unfolded slowly, each sentence like a heartbeat reaching out from the past. She wrote about the night she stayed up worrying when he first moved to the city, about the pride she felt when she saw his byline in the newspaper, about her loneliness when the calls grew less frequent and the house got quieter. She admitted her own regrets, how she wished she had told him more about his father, how she feared that silence had built walls between them that neither knew how to climb. The letter wasn't dramatic. It was heartbreakingly ordinary, filled with the simple ache of love that had nowhere left to go. By the time he finished reading, Ethan's eyes were wet, not from the shock of revelation, but from the unbearable tenderness of being loved so quietly and so completely by someone he had taken for granted. The city outside felt a world away, irrelevant, almost cruel in its speed. He sat there in that fading light, holding the letter to his chest like a fragile piece of evidence that love never truly dies. It just waits to be found. In that moment, Ethan realized that forgiveness doesn't always come from someone else. Sometimes it starts when you finally allow yourself to remember. And as the shadows lengthened across the floor, he whispered softly to the empty room, "I'm sorry, Mom." The words hung there, trembling in the air, but for the first time in years, he felt a small, unfamiliar peace take root inside him. A quiet promise that this was only the beginning. The next morning, Ethan awoke before the city stirred, the early light filtering through the half-open blinds and casting stripes across the hardwood floor of his mother's old house, making everything feel suspended in time, neither fully alive nor entirely gone. The letter he had read the previous day lay open on the kitchen table, the ink slightly smudged from the weight of his trembling hands, and for the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to linger in the quiet, listening to the faint ticking of the old wall clock that had always seemed to mark not just the passage of hours, but the rhythm of a life carefully lived. Memories began to surface unbidden, like fragments of a dream he hadn't dared to recall. The smell of fresh bread on Saturday mornings, the way his mother hummed while folding laundry, the worn path she left in the backyard garden where she tended roses he had once pulled weeds from carelessly. He had once pulled weeds, pretending to help. The city, with all its noise and deadlines, had dulled these recollections over the years. But here, in this stillness, they came back sharply, painfully, and beautifully. He realized that he had spent decades chasing stories, uncovering hidden truths in other people's lives, while his own history lay buried beneath assumption and neglect. Now the letters seemed to breathe, each one a lifeline to the mother who had loved him in ways he had never fully comprehended. He reached for the second envelope, hesitating for a fraction of a second, as if bracing for some revelation that might shatter him entirely, and then tore it open. The handwriting was instantly familiar, the looping cursive carrying the same warmth and rhythm as the first, but this letter was different. It held not only affection, but confession. She wrote about the days when she struggled to keep their household together, how fear had sometimes dictated her choices, how she had shielded him from truths about his father's absence, believing it would spare him pain. She recounted moments she had long since buried, evenings when she cried silently after he had gone to bed, wishing she could rewrite the past, make decisions that might have brought them closer instead of pushing them apart. Ethan's chest ached as he absorbed every word. Her voice felt present, almost corporeal, like a gentle hand on his shoulder, a mother's touch reaching across time to soothe the regrets he had carried alone. He remembered arguments in his teenage years, moments when his impatience had met her caution with frustration, when he had walked away from conversations in anger, never realizing how fleeting her presence could be, how fragile human connection is when left unspoken. The city outside, with its hum of life and indifferent traffic, faded from his awareness as he sank deeper into the narrative she had constructed, a mosaic of truth, sorrow, and unfulfilled longing. Each paragraph, each sentence seemed to pull back layers of misunderstanding, revealing the tenderness and steadfastness that had always been at the core of her love. For hours he read, pausing only to absorb the emotions, to let the words settle and resonate. And in doing so, he found himself confronting the uncomfortable yet necessary recognition that forgiveness and understanding often arrive late. Carried not by words spoken in life, but by those that linger after it has passed. By mid-morning, sunlight flooded the kitchen, illuminating dust particles that floated lazily in the warm air. And Ethan finally set the letters aside, feeling both broken and whole at once. And as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the worn floorboards, he placed the letters carefully back in their box, feeling a fragile hope take root. A hope that even in absence, connection endures, and that the discoveries of today could illuminate the path for tomorrow, guiding him toward reconciliation, not only with his mother's memory, but with himself. As the following days stretched on, Ethan became absorbed in the rhythm of the house, moving from room to room like someone tracing a memory, feeling the quiet pulse of a life that had once been vibrant and now existed only in echoes. He discovered a small desk in the corner of what used to be his childhood bedroom. The surface worn with years of pencil marks and scraped notebooks, and atop it lay a journal he hadn't noticed before. The leather cover was soft, almost fragile, and when he opened it, the handwriting, familiar and intimate, spoke directly to him, bridging the years and the distance that had grown between them. The entries were raw and honest. His mother's fears about raising him alone, her lonely nights wondering if she was doing enough, the small joys she celebrated quietly when she saw him grow into the man she had always hoped he would become. Some entries contained regrets he had long suspected, like moments when she wished she had reached out more. or when her decisions had unintentionally caused him pain. Others were lighter, full of humor, teasing anecdotes about neighbors and little victories of everyday life, like a perfectly baked pie or a letter from a friend that made her smile. Ethan read each page slowly, letting the words sink in, letting the cadence of her thoughts carry him through the complex layers of her love. There were letters he hadn't yet opened, tucked neatly between the pages, each one a carefully preserved fragment of a life lived for him and yet shielded from him. When he finally reached one marked with his name and a date from his teenage years, he hesitated, a lump forming in his throat, aware that this was more than a letter. It was a confession, an attempt to reach across time. The words inside revealed not only her love, but the difficult truths she had borne silently, the hardships, the loneliness, the moments when she had feared she was failing him, and the choices she had made in the hope of protecting him. Reading it, Ethan felt a mixture of sorrow, gratitude, and understanding that was almost overwhelming. Each sentence seemed to dissolve years of unresolved tension, replacing it with a profound connection that he had never realized was still alive. In the evenings, he would sit by the window with the letters spread around him, the city lights distant and muted, and whisper fragments of her words aloud, letting them reverberate through the empty rooms, as if speaking them might make her presence more tangible, more real. Slowly, he began to piece together the mosaic of her life, understanding her in ways he never had before. Not as a mother defined by absence or mistakes, but as a woman who loved fiercely, imperfectly, yet with a constancy that transcended time and error. And in these moments, as shadows lengthened across the floor and the golden light of dusk filled the rooms, Ethan realized that he was no longer just uncovering her past. He was discovering his own, recognizing the threads of connection, forgiveness, and enduring love that could now shape the life he still had ahead, guiding him toward a future where memory and presence intertwine in a quiet, unspoken promise of reconciliation and hope. By midweek, Ethan had settled into an almost meditative routine, waking early to the faint rustle of wind through the trees outside, pouring coffee into the chipped mug his mother had always favored, and sitting for hours surrounded by her letters, photographs, and journals. Each envelope he opened seemed to unravel more of a story he had only glimpsed in fragments, and with each revelation, he felt the tug of emotions he hadn't allowed himself to confront for years: regret, longing, sorrow, and unexpectedly, joy. One afternoon, as he sorted through a stack of papers in the study, he found an envelope addressed to him with no return address, no postmark, simply his name written in the same delicate cursive he had grown up recognizing. Opening it carefully, he realized it was different from the others. It was more like a journal entry condensed into a single letter, full of confessions he had never anticipated. She wrote about his father, the man whose absence had defined much of Ethan's childhood, explaining decisions she had made to shield him from disappointment and heartbreak. She admitted the complexities of love, of life's unpredictable turns, and the necessity of certain silences that at the time had felt like abandonment. As Ethan read, the house seemed to breathe with him, every creak and shadow taking on the weight of her voice, every beam of light slicing across the floor, illuminating the truths she had tucked away for decades. He realized with an aching clarity that these letters were not simply relics of the past. They were lifelines, pathways through which he could finally reconcile the distance, the misunderstandings, and the quiet grief that had followed him into adulthood. He felt a stirring in his chest, a mixture of relief and sorrow as he acknowledged the extraordinary depth of her care and the sacrifices she had made silently, without fanfare or expectation. That evening, he wandered through the backyard, the cool air brushing against his face, the familiar scent of earth and lavender carrying him back to summers long ago. And he imagined his mother moving through the spaces he had never noticed, tending to flowers, humming softly, always present. Even when absent, sitting on the old wooden bench beneath the maple tree, he held a letter against his heart, letting its words mingle with memories until the lines between past and present blurred. He began to speak aloud, softly, as if she could hear him. I understand now. I see you. I forgive you, and I hope you forgive me. The words felt like a bridge spanning decades, and for the first time in his life, Ethan allowed himself to truly grieve. Not only her absence, but the years in which he had failed to reach her. The conversations left unspoken, the hugs never given, the moments lost to pride, distraction, and fear. And yet, amid the grief, there was a delicate, almost imperceptible hope taking root. A realization that the letters, these fragments of her soul preserved in ink, had become more than communication from the past. They were guides for the future, lessons in love, endurance, and understanding that would shape the way he lived from this moment onward. With the evening shadows stretching long across the yard and the soft hum of the city in the distance, Ethan felt a sense of purpose emerge. To carry her story forward, to honor the complexities of her life, and to let the wisdom and affection she had poured into these letters inform the man he still had the chance to become. It was a quiet awakening, subtle yet profound, and in that stillness, he understood that love, when expressed with patience and honesty, could transcend time, absence, and even death itself, leaving behind a legacy that could guide the living toward empathy, forgiveness, and hope. Over the next few days, Ethan found himself inhabiting a strange in-between world, where the quiet intimacy of his mother's house collided with the relentless pulse of the city he had left behind. He spent mornings sifting through drawers filled with mementos, ticket stubs from plays she had attended alone, pressed flowers from walks he had never joined her on, a faded recipe card for his favorite chocolate cake with her tiny, precise handwriting looping across it.